is a big country with a landscape that ranges from city to countryside, industrial centers to farmland. Wowed by the breathtaking beauty of our natural resources, surrounded by the dazzle of man-made wonders, we are a people as diverse as the landscape. And yet, as varied as our regional cultures are, there are ties that bind us together as a nation. One such tie is our love of the internal combustion engine in all its various forms. Another is our desire to compete. When the two come together, about the only thing you can call it is Motor Mania. The American cowboy, a frontier hero. The cowboy of the Old West was an athlete of remarkable skill, and an important part of his legend was the rodeo, where cowboys would match their skills in contests that mimicked their jobs on the ranch. Today, in arenas across the country, cowboys continue to pit themselves against men and beasts. For many people, the long-haul truckers are our modern cowboys. Like their horse-bound brethren, truckers have learned that skills honed on the job can be useful in competition. So when a group of truck racers gathered at Dover Downs in Dover, Delaware, the spirit of the rodeo was reborn. As in other rodeos, big rig rodeos feature events where competitors use their day-to-day driving skills. At Dover, the rodeo featured 4 events: a drag race, a pit crew competition, slalom run, and a 15-lap sprint race. All the rodeo trucks are modified for competition. Weighing 14,000 pounds, these big rigs are the equivalent of almost 4 Winston Cup stock cars or 1 big elephant. The engines account for almost 3,000 pounds by themselves. These incredibly durable power plants go 200,000 miles between overhauls, need only a check of bearings and an oil change between races. Other weighty modifications include roll cages and heavy padding inside the truck to protect the driver. Besides the roll cages, other racing modifications include double shocks and springs for the right front tire. The suspension changes help the truck handle the high banks of Dover. The first test of suspensions and the drivers comes in the drag race competition. For the big riggers, this meant 1 lap around the track called the Monster Mile. For those in the know, this event is also known as the last mile home after 6 weeks on the road, Trophy Day. In the finals at Dover, Bill Johnson in truck number 11 defeated E.J. Utley. It is the driver that usually makes the difference in drag racing, but in the pit crew competition, the driver is more spectator than participant. The crews carry the load in this event literally. The object is simple. One team at a time changes the right front tire of its truck as quickly as possible. Everything on a big rig is big, and that applies to the front tire as well. A normal stock car tire weighs 80 pounds. A big rig tire, 300 pounds. Watching the crews get the old tires off and the new ones on looks like something out of the old TV game show, Beat the Clock. Montgomery's team won the event with a 1-minute tire change. But not every crew was as well practiced. Practice is the only way to explain how a big rig driver can back an 18-wheeler into a spot so tight you'd have problems parking a Toyota. The time slalom runs are the perfect chance for drivers to highlight their maneuvering skills. At Dover, the winning time was E.J. Utley's fast. And the good news from the pit crew competition is that things will be wrapped up in time for the 15-lap sprint race. The climax of the rodeo is the 15-lap sprint race. There's little in nature that compares to a dozen or so big rigs hurtling around a super speedway at 100 miles an hour. On the first lap, E.J. Utley in truck number 5 got a little confused about which way he was supposed to go, and finally decided to park his truck and ask directions. Utley emerged unhurt from his conversation with the inside wall, and after a caution period to clear the track, Bill Johnson in truck number 11 shot into the lead. Johnson held on to the lead to win the sprint race. Based upon points scored in the 4 events, he and E.J. Utley shared overall top honors for the Big Rig Rodeo. The American trucker, a modern-day hero, carrying on in the spirit and tradition of the cowboy. In some ways, the landscape of the American farm has not changed much in 100 years. What has changed are the tools of the trade. Innovative, inventive farmers looking for better ways to get the job done saw to that. Of all the tools that help change farming, none has had the impact of the tractor. From its steam engine beginning through the development of the modern tractor, farmers have looked for ways to make them better. As any hot rodder will tell you, the only way to see if a new performance part works is to test it, and farmers are no exception. It was from these humble origins that the sport of tractor pulling was born. Today, tractor pulling has become a major professional sport with its own sanctioning bodies and major corporate sponsorship. While pulling is most popular through the Farm Belt, it is quickly gaining national attention. One of the reasons for the growing popularity of pulling is the diversity of the machine. Of course, some of the tractors might look a little out of place on a farm. Modified tractors are some of the most mechanically advanced machines in all of racing. Feats of homegrown technology that would confound a college-trained engineer. The tractors are powered by a variety of engine combinations, but by far the most popular choice is multiple groups of supercharged big block engines similar to those in dragsters and funny cars. One of the appeals of the class is that anything goes. And if you've always wanted a jet-powered tractor, well, why not? Generally, the pulling arena is a 300-foot-long dirt track. Into it come two combatants. One is the driver, determined to pilot his tractor the entire 300 feet for a full pull. The other combatant is the sled. As much a mechanical marvel as the tractors, its job, stop the driver from reaching the back door. A complex series of gears, levers, and pulleys determines how quickly the weight box moves up the sled. More weight can be added or subtracted from the box depending on the class competing. It takes a combination of skill, luck, and timing to make a full pull. One reason is that driving a tractor in competition is almost an art form. Since the front wheels rarely touch the ground during a run, the drivers do most of the steering using brakes on the rear wheel. Momentum is important in pulling. For a successful pull, a driver must lead hard and keep the sled aimed down the track. Any little deviation can be costly. But when all of the elements come together, it's 300 feet and out the back door. Perhaps the second most important farm tool after the tractor is the pickup truck. So if you can have tractor pull, how about truck pull? And then there are always a couple of guys who like to stand out from the crowd. No, this is not a new handicap system for drag racing. There's also a pulling class for funny cars. This is pulling's newest category, retired government vehicle. Proof of pulling's growing popularity outside the Farm Belt is the newest version of the sport, held in stadiums like the Houston Astrodome. While the track is shorter, the stadium competition is just as intense as its outdoor coverage. It seems like if something's got an engine and four wheels, people will find a way to compete with it. Whether it's tractors on an oval track or America's fastest growing motorsport, demolition combine. Winter in Wyoming. Snow blankets the ground. And the second most popular activity among natives is sleeping late. Because up here, the #1 activity is snowmobiling. A popular source of transportation and recreation, snowmobiles also provide the ideal winter outlet for pent-up racing frustration. Snowmobile racing comes in every shape, size, and color imaginable, from ovals to road courses to drag. If it's a type of racing, enthusiasts have found a way to do it on snowmobile. One type of racing that harkens back to the Southern California Timing Association and the pre-drag race days is the NSSR Speed Trials. Of course, instead of a dry lake, the NSSR trials take place on frozen lakes. Among the 6 events the National Snowmobile Speed Runs organization sanctions each year are the time trials near Riverton, Wyoming, held in conjunction with the town's Wild West Winter Carnival. The NSSR sanctions records in 28 classes, but the kings of the frozen quarter mile are the unlimited sleds. And although no two are completely alike, they're all built for one purpose: speed.
It's a very elite sport. There's only 7 men in the world that do this. The machines themselves run anywhere from $80,000 on up to $250,000. The purse is very small. They don't do this for money. They do it for, it's hard telling what they do it for. It was a very rebel sort of racing, and these guys came out and raced. There were no classes made for them. They came out and raced on half-mile unprepared tracks. They didn't win anything because there was no classifications for them. They just wanted to go out and go fast.
The current speed record is 168.08 miles per hour, held by the Budweiser Snow King. Piloting a snowmobile at those speeds is no easy task.
Everyone is in a scoop device, you know, it's an uncertain substance, you know, it's slippery and all that stuff. And it's kind of nice to go out there and just conquer it. But once I'm strapped in the machine, it's real basic and it's relaxing for me then. That's the calmest I am. When I get down in it, when I'm strapped in, that's my home. That's where I like to live.
The former record holder is Marv Jorgensen with a speed of 160.37 miles per hour. A longtime racer, Jorgensen's love of speed first attracted him to the sport.
Well, I started back in the 60s with cars and went to motorcycles and went to snowmobiles in the 70s. And got to have something to do in the wintertime, and that's the sport to do, I guess. This has got some acceleration. That's what you're after, yeah. It's in your blood and you just want to go fast.
There are two types of unlimited sleds. One type are the closed cockpit sleds like the Coors Light Silver Bullet, which features a dragster-style roll cage and steering wheel. For power, it uses two V6 Marine engines and is capable of over 170 miles per hour. The most radical sled in competition has to be the Bud Snow King. Beneath its streamlined fiberglass body rests a supercharged, big block Chevrolet engine. A cockpit with full instrumentation and a dragster-style chassis. The open cockpit sleds, like this one of Mark Sandberg's, at least sort of looks like a traditional snowmobile. Well, maybe not entirely, but at least it has handlebars. The sleds all run on alcohol or racing fuel, and while nitromethane is prohibited, many drivers use nitrous oxide for that little extra boost. Besides the fuel ban, NSSR requires all sleds to be ski-steered and track-driven. All the tracks are covered with special picks to aid traction on the ice. During speed trials, drivers have a maximum of 4 runs per day in which to set records. However, for a record to be official, NSSR requires a second run within 2% of the record speed. Ice conditions at Riverton were not ideal for record runs. Top speed of the trials was Mark Sandberg's 162-mile-an-hour pass. Do you love throw stock? The gear-banging 7-second 190-mile-an-hour excitement only they can bring. Of course, in Wisconsin, they love their snowmobiles, too. Enough so that when the snow heads south for the summer and the countryside is green, enthusiasts still like to get together and work on their sleds. And to be honest, as long as they've got them out there and running, well, a little racing never hurts. Throughout the summer and fall, snowmobile enthusiasts in 10 states race their sleds in Southern Wisconsin Drag Race Association sanctioned events. While a snowmobile race in the middle of the summer might seem paradoxical for the competitors, snow or grass, it's still snowmobiling.
Grass drag racing started years ago, probably around 25 years ago. Several guys got together in a bar over a few beers, and they couldn't see spending $1,000 and $2,000 for a sled that they could only run for 2 or 3 months out of the year. Well, they had a few more beers, and they decided, let's get outside and race these things on the grass. The attraction of the guy out here racing for each individual racer, I believe, is the thrill of flying down this track at speeds in excess of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour.
What we do is we start off, and usually we run different heats depending on the number of entries in each class. We'll run a series of heats, breaking down in the semifinals, and then you'll end up with your final 4 drivers. We have 5 lanes operating today, and we'll run up to 5 sleds depending on the entries. Most of the time we're running 3 or 4 sleds abreast.
Your stock classes are more of a showroom type of snowmobile. You've got improved classes where there's some slight modification allowed. Mod stock where there's some lightning and total engine modification allowed. And then you've got the open classes, which is an anything type place.
Pat Houck is a long-time ice racer just getting into grass drag racing. He's finding it presents a new set of challenges.
Racing on the dirt, you pretty much got to drive the sled. You got to handle it. On the ice, you know, you've got nice sharp runners. You can steer and stuff. Here, the skis, they don't touch too often. You have to lean on the snowmobile, but going one way, lean the other way to really steer it.
Because snowmobiling is a family activity, there's a category for children under 16. A top junior racer is Carrie Schluter.
Started about when I was 8 years old. Came to races with my dad. I helped him out, pit crew and stuff like that. So when I was old enough, when I was 12 years old, I was able to race the junior classes. I always liked it since I first came. And it's just the thrill of being with all the guys and helping out. And so nice and all.
Perhaps the best justification for snowmobile racing on grass is that, like all racing, it's an unequaled kick.
Talk about your first love. You talk about getting married. Those kind of highs, you know, you're really excited. Well, I hope my wife ain't around, but this tops them all.
By the way, if you hope to avoid the summer snowmobile crowd by heading out to your favorite lake, be forewarned. The sport is called water skipping for fairly obvious reasons. It started in Wisconsin in the early 70s and has grown into a popular summer sport. The racing action includes drags, first across the lake wind, to oval course sprint races and time trials. Snowmobiles are not designed to float, but as long as the rider keeps the engine running and the track spinning, the sleds can move along at a pretty good clip, easily 10 to 15 knots per hour. Remember the 3 rules for success in water skipping. Try to keep yourself balanced on the sled. Always keep the engine running when on the water. And never, ever go racing less than an hour after eating. Now, Southwest of Portland, Oregon, the landscape alternates between rich grazing pastures and lush timberland. About 45 miles west of Portland, nestled in this land of lumber and dairy, is Tillamook County, renowned for its outstanding cheeses. Sitting along Highway 101, the north-south route that runs along the Pacific coast, is the city of Tillamook. Tillamook seems an unlikely place for one of racing's most unique events. It happens once a year as the community gathers for a ritual as old as rural America, the County Fair.
And this is KTIL, serving Tillamook. We've been around now for 40 years, and we're broadcasting live from the Tillamook County Fair. And you know, there's a lot going on here at the 71st Annual Fair. Did you know that? Besides all the great exhibits, the Midway and the Carnival rides, there's the 4-H and FFA livestock judging. There we go, pari-mutuel horse racing, and of course, the Grand Prix of Tillamook. Sounds good, yeah.
At first glance, the Grand Prix of Tillamook is a throwback to the early years of racing, when daring young men would hang it all out in hot rod Model Ts at dirt tracks across America. The cars are all vintage Ts, maintained in original stock condition. The newest was made in 1926, the oldest before 1910. Piloting one of these Model Ts around the county's half-mile dirt oval is addicting. George Hurleman began racing 34 years ago, and despite the physicalness of the racing, he still enjoys competing.
I love it. It gets in your blood. You know, an hour before the first race, you think your bones hurting and your knees hurting, your hips hurting, but adrenaline's amazing. I don't know, it's just an amazing painkiller. And once I start hearing them T's run, I'm ready to go.
In racing, cars evolve over the years as technology increases. Not so for the Grand Prix of Tillamook. These cars have remained virtually unchanged for more than 50 years.
I heard about it, and I thought it'd be a lot of fun when I was, maybe better not even say how old I was, but I won the championship the very first year I raced, and I loved it so much that I asked the guy that I was racing for if he'd sell me the T, and he did. The basic race hasn't changed a bit, other than when I started racing, if 2 cars finished, it was a miracle, and now they all run strong and good.
Vintage car racing may be all the rage these days, but what sets the Grand Prix of Tillamook apart from the crowd are the passengers and how they get aboard. Pig and Ford racing, as the Grand Prix of Tillamook is better known, is among the most physically taxing of all motorsports. A typical race begins with the Le Mans-style start. At the sound of the gun, drivers rush to their pre-assigned fans, grab a pig, and head for their cars. With 40 pounds of squealing, squirming piglet under one arm, the drivers hand-start their Ts. Passengers safely aboard, the drivers set out for a lap around the track at full throttle. Back down Pigpen Row, the drivers bring their cars to a stop as close as possible to their pens. Shutting the cars off, the drivers then execute the famed pig exchange, putting one pig down and picking up the other. Then it's back out for another lap. The first driver to complete the course 3 times wins. As with most motorsports, the origins of pig and Ford racing are shrouded in legend and conjecture.
Realistically, there were 2 old gentlemen and so on. They weren't old at the time, but Years ago, they were running an old Model T down the road, and as the story goes anyway, and it must be some basis in fact, I guess some pigs jumped out of the side of the road and went running ahead of them, and they run them down and got out of their car and caught them, and gee, they got back to the car and they thought, that was a lot of fun. Well, we got to try this at the fair, see?
The races are run by the 10 members of the Pig and Model T Club. 6 qualifying races over 3 days determine the entrants for the finals. The race that crowns the world champion. Each racer has up to 3 chances to make the finals. Among this year's 4 finalists is 3-time champion Rick Hurleman, driver of car number 12. The defending champ, Rick learned most of what he knows from his father, George. Ken Salo, driver of car number 20, is like Rick, a second-generation racer and a 3-time champion. Salo last won the overall title in 1985. He finished 2nd overall last year. The 3rd past champion in the race is Ken Wasmer, driver of car number 10. Wasmer was leading last year's final race when he had to stop for a loose pig. He eventually finished 3rd.
Depends on the track conditions. If it's a hard track, you go a lot faster. If it's a soft track, anything can happen. So experience makes a lot of difference, but there's a lot of luck involved in it.
With all a driver does during a typical Pig and Ford race, there are many opportunities for mistakes. As with all racing, success requires minimizing these mistakes.
It took me about 8-10 years to get comfortable and get relaxed enough to where there's 100 mistakes you can make out there. It looks pretty simple, but every 1/10 of a second makes quite a bit of difference, especially on the start. If you get out first, you got a lot better chance of winning. Things just roll smoother if you aren't sucking somebody's dirt.
But if you just concentrate on getting your hands on that pig and settle him in your arms while you're running back to your tee, don't expect him, to grab it and get him all reined in the pen here. Just do it as you run back to your pen, from the pen to your Model T. When you get to the Model T, get that switch on, get it started, and jump on and have both feet landing, one on the throttle and one on low pedal.
Hand starting a Model T, even when the cars were new, was never an easy task. Weighed down by 40 pounds of livestock, and in the heat of competition, the task becomes harder still. One missed crank can take a driver right out of contention. Of all the elements a driver must control, the most uncontrollable is the pig. Since to win, a driver must have his pig at the end of the race, it's important not to fumble away victory by losing the pig. One of the overriding tenets of Pig and Ford racing is pig safety. And as the drivers have learned, the pigs seem to enjoy themselves once they get used to the whole concept.
We take care of them, and the first day is the worst. They bite and they kick and they squeal, and the second day is, about the same. But by the 3rd day, they're really quite calm. It's amazing. They just kind of know what's going to happen, and they just go for the ride.
I tell you what, every day they're out here racing is one less day they're going to be made into bacon. But that ought to help be an incentive. But you've got to realize a lot of us are farmers here, and, if we don't treat our cows right, we're not going to get the milk. So, we treat animals right. But the big thing is we stress. Watch out for the pig, the heck with the driver, I mean, the more comfortable he is, the less fight he gives you, so it's better all the way around. And realistically, we try to be pretty careful.
Perhaps the finest testament to the safety of the pigs comes from those who have left racing to pursue other careers. Over 28. After 3 days of qualifying, the moment all have waited a year for, the Pig and Ford World Championship. The drivers draw lots to determine pig pen number and starting position. In the pens, the pigs make their final preparations, while on the track, the starter makes sure all the cars are correctly lined up. The crowd braces, the drivers get set, and at the sound of the starter's gun, they're off. As they leave the pens, Len Hurleman, car number 16, leads Wasmer, car number 10. Rick Hurleman, car number 12, and Ken Zalo, car number 20. Exiting turn 2, Wasmer moves into the lead, followed by the rest of the field. It's a clean exchange, and Ken Wasmer continues his lead. Following in second, Rick Hurleman, car number 12, is beginning to make up some time. Ken Wasmer in car number 10 comes in for his second exchange and continues his lead over the field, including Ken Zalo, car number 20, who's in fourth. Wasmer makes another clean exchange, but both the Hurlemans are beginning to close the gap. As Wasmer comes into turns 3 and 4, behind him is Rick Hurleman in second. And then Ken Zalo, who has moved past Len Hurleman, into third. Down the front straightaway, Wasmer slides to a stop, makes his last drop off, and becomes the newest Pig and Ford World Champion. The final standings show Ken Zalo in third, Rick Hurleman is second, and of course, Ken Wasmer in first. The most appealing aspect of Pig and Ford racing is its purity, racing simply for the sake of competition. While today's racers are celebrating this year's exploits, already the next generation of racers is getting ready, as is the next generation of passengers. It seems people were born with a desire to compete. No matter what region of the country, no matter what the occupation, we are always looking for ways to match ourselves against others. And as long as the internal combustion engine is with us, people will find a way to race. Whether it is the incongruity of snowmobiles on water, the lighthearted destruction of demolition combines, or the outright uniqueness of Pig and Ford racing. The bottom line is that as long as people find creative outlets for their competitive needs in types of racing as varied as the regions of the country, there will always be Motor Mania.